In our last episode, we ventured to the Rift to recover another wuuthrad fragment being held inside Treva's watch. Upon returning to Jorrvaskr, Kodlak asked us to go out and retrieve the head of a Glenmoril witch in hopes that its powers will cure him of lycanthropy and ensure that he passes on to Sovngarde. This is where our story continues. As we step out of the Jorrvaskr living quarters and begin making our way upstairs, we notice something we hadn't before. The fragments of wuuthrad, all arranged neatly against the wall. The collection is not complete yet, of course, but when it is, hopefully Jorland will be able to put this legendary battle axe back together. Personally, I can't wait to see what it looks like and maybe even try it out on some bandits. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Kodlak asked us to run a special errand for him that involves retrieving a Glenmoril witch head from Glenmoril Coven, a remote cave located to the northwest of Falkreath. Looking at the map, we can already tell that we're going to have to do some walking because the closest location to Glenmoril Coven that I had discovered in my playthrough is Soloon's Sinkhole. We can fast travel there, but not long after we arrive, an elder dragon swoops in and attacks. We managed to deal a little bit of damage with our dragonbone bow, but to finish it off and protect the people of this fine little community, we have to draw our sword and get personal.
It can't be. You took its very soul.
Indeed I did, good sir. I'd love to stay and chat, but I've got other matters to attend to. After looting the Elder Dragon, we can begin making the journey southeast towards Glenmoril Coven, which, needless to say, was pretty uneventful. There was a cave bear that attacked us at one point, along with the occasional wolf, but other than that, it was a rather peaceful walk through the night. Eventually, the objective marker forces us off the beaten path and into the woods. A thick layer of fog falls upon us, and as we draw closer to the coven, we begin to see signs that we are, without a doubt, in the presence of witches. Hagraven symbols formed from animal bones and antlers, taproots hanging from the trees, spriggan heads on stakes. Yeah, we're in the right place, all right. Once we're inside Glenmoril Coven, we can follow a tunnel southwest until it takes a sharp turn to the right. However, before continuing onward, we can step into a dark alcove and loot a novice-locked chest for some gold and iron arrows. After returning to the main tunnel, we can follow the path northwest until we come to a large chamber. Here we find a Glenmoril witch patrolling the area. Pulling out our bow, we can crouch down and take it out from a distance. After looting the witch's body and collecting its head, we are given the option to return to Kodlak and complete the quest. However, I didn't want to leave until every nook and cranny of Glenmoril's Coven was completely explored, so instead we'll stick around for a bit longer. On top of a ramp leading to an upper level, we find a frostbite spider, which thankfully goes down after just a couple of shots. After looting the frostbite spider and getting one of our arrows back, we can continue following this upper level walkway. Looks like there's another tunnel to the north, but first we have to take care of this skeever charging at us through the dark. The tunnel to the north twists and turns until we reach another chamber, and after fending off another skeever, we can take out a second witch and collect its head. The Glenmoril witches are slow-moving and aren't very difficult to defeat, but I found that getting close enough to them to actually be able to use my sword was challenging. The firebolts deal a lot of damage and they come at you pretty fast, so the key is to keep moving and getting close as quickly as possible. This is why I would advise using a melee weapon inside of Glenmoril Coven instead of a ranged weapon. At least in my experience, it's easier to be quick on your feet while wielding a sword or an axe than it is while trying to aim with a bow. After heading back out to the main chamber, we can continue to follow the upper level pathway to the west until we reach the mouth of another tunnel. Like the last one, this tunnel leads to a chamber containing a third hagraven, which we can kill after quickly defeating a frostbite spider.
Your blood is ours, companion!
After collecting the witch's head, we can loot a nearby chest for some gold, lockpicks, an ebony mace, and an iron sword of shocks. Next to the chest, we find a tent with a couple of barrels inside, one of which contains some cabbage and the other some honeycomb. It was difficult to see towards the back of the tent, but we still managed to find some slaughterfish scales and a copy of the book Horror of Castle Zyre, hope I'm saying that right, which increases our destruction level. Stepping out of the tent, we find a potion of plentiful magicka and a paralysis potion on top of a table. And after looting the frostbite spider we killed earlier for some frostbite venom, we can once again return to the central chamber. It looks like those were the only 2 tunnels on the upper level, so now we can start to explore the lower level. Here we find essentially the same setup, 2 tunnels leading to smaller chambers, each of which contains a Glenmoril witch and some minor loot. Once we have killed all of the witches inside of the coven, we can return to Whiterun with a total of 5 Glenmoril witch heads in our inventory. Looks like Kodlak will be able to cure himself of lycanthropy after all. But as we approach Jorrvaskr, we see that something is not quite right. A small crowd has gathered near the steps, and what's this? A dead body? Torvar, what happened here?
The Silver Hand. They finally had the nerve to attack Jorrvaskr. We got most of them, but I think a few stragglers made it out.
An attack on Jorrvaskr? Oh my gosh, this is horrible. I knew that the war between the companions and the Silver Hand was escalating, but I never thought it would come to this.
Where have you been?
That's not important right now. What happened here?
One of the fiercest battles I've ever seen. The Silver Hand. They finally found enough courage to attack Jorrvaskr. We fought them off, but the old man, Kodlak, he's dead.
No, not Kodlak. He didn't deserve this. Was anyone else hurt?
No, but they made off with all our fragments of wuuthrad. But you and I are going to reclaim them. We will bring the battle to their chief camp. There will be none left living to tell their stories. Only songs of Jorrvaskr will be sung. We will avenge Kodlak, and they will know terror before the end.
Stepping towards the center of the room, we see Kodlak lying dead on the floor. Even more painful than the image of his lifeless body is the thought of him being rejected from Sovngarde, something that he feared more than anything. We were just about to cure him of lycanthropy and fulfill his dying wish, but we were too late. Looking at the wall above the stairs leading down into the living quarters, we see that, indeed, the fragments of wuuthrad have been stolen. All of that work, all of that sacrifice, and nothing to show for it. Vilkas said that he wants to avenge Kodlak by slaughtering the Silver Hand and reclaiming the wuuthrad fragments from Driftshade Refuge, a northern fortress located southeast of Dawnstar. Personally, I'm all in favor of this plan, and even though I know that it was this pattern of retaliation that got Kodlak killed in the first place, one way or another, justice must be served. In my playthrough, I decided to fast travel just northeast of Driftshade Refuge to Hobbs Fall Cave, and make the rest of the journey on foot. Upon arriving, we are immediately reminded of how harsh the conditions are in northern Skyrim. Cold gusts of wind sweep up the snow beneath our feet. Giant ice formations stretch across the horizon line. And then suddenly, a frost troll. Heading west, we can crest a hill and then look down upon the frozen landscape below. Here we find Driftshade Refuge, a fortress that was likely large and elaborate at one time, but now lies in ruin beneath the snowdrifts. With Vilkas hurrying to catch up, we can begin making our way down the side of a cliff and then slowly creep up a ramp leading to the roof. Here we find a Silver Hand guarding what we can only assume is the entrance to the fort.
Is someone there? Huh? Come back here.
A second silver hand appears at the base of the fort, but we're able to jump down and defeat him without any trouble. Circling around to the front of the fort, we find more werewolf heads on pikes, similar to the ones we found outside of Gallows Rock. After looting a silver hand for some gold and a potion of stamina, we can step inside Driftshade Refuge. Another werewolf head greets us as we make our way north down some stairs. The stairs continue to take us down into the fortress to the west, and after a quick right turn, we can pass through a wooden door into our first chamber. Here we get attacked by 2 more silver hand, but with Vilkas fighting by our side, they prove to be no match for us.
That's all you got?
Looking around, we see that we can either explore a room to the west or pass through a door to the north. I decided to head west in my playthrough, which incidentally turned out to be the only option forward, because the door to the north was barred shut. Inside the western room, we find a number of random objects spread out across a wooden table, and along the wall are several bookshelves. Strangely enough, though, almost every book has been either ruined or scorched, leading us to believe that something tragic happened here. We do find an apothecary's satchel on one of the shelves, however. Suddenly, a rogue silver hand charges at us from a hallway to the north. Continuing north, we can enter another small room with a connecting hallway leading west. On top of a table, we can loot a potion of plentiful healing and a grand soul gem, though we also find an iron helmet. There are some more bookshelves with ruined books on the opposite end of the room, and nearby is a second table with a couple of shields and an iron mace. Hidden in the shadows, near the door leading into the westward hallway, we find another shelf full of iron weapons. I wasn't really interested in looting any of it though, so I decided to continue down the hall to the west. After heading up a few steps and passing through a door to the north, we find ourselves in another chamber with more silver hand.
Never stop!
I found it a bit difficult at times to fight alongside Vilkas, especially when fighting multiple enemies at once. I really had to pay attention to who was who, and though I tried my best to avoid it, there was a time or two where I accidentally hit Vilkas. Thankfully, when that happens, he just tells us to watch where we're swinging our sword, but it was still something I tried desperately to prevent from happening. After looting both floors of this multi-level chamber for a few potions and some loot inside of an adept-locked chest, we can continue down some stairs to the north. The hallway continues onward, but first we can pick an adept-locked door on our left and sneak into a bedroom, with one of the silver hand fast asleep in bed. After killing the silver hand before he even had a chance to stand up, we can have a look around this rather dilapidated room. The only thing that appears to still be in decent shape is this wooden table along the western wall, upon which we can loot a potion of minor stamina and 3 steel ingots. There's another potion sitting on the shelf next to the silver hand's bed, and in the corner of the room to the left of the entrance is an unlocked chest with some loot inside. Heading back out into the hallway, we can travel north and then head east until we come to another dark and depressing room. Here we are forced to face off against 3 Silverhand.
Ace! We are routed!
Vilkas chases the last remaining Silverhand back out into the hallway we just walked down, and, well, he can handle it. Heading through a door to the south, you know what, on second thought, we should probably go help him.
We're routed!
Heading back into that room with the 3 Silverhand, we can loot a draught of regeneration sitting upon a table and a coin purse on top of another. Next to the table with the coin purse is an unlocked chest with some gold and lockpicks, and then heading into the connecting room to the south, we find a mammoth steak. For what it's worth, I read online that this is one of the few locations in the game where you can find a pre-cooked mammoth steak. Interesting little tidbit of information for you there. To the east, we find a hallway, but it's blocked by a gate. Thankfully, all we have to do to lower it is pull a lever, but you have to wonder why this is even here to begin with. Clearly the Silverhand are trying to prevent something from coming up here, but what? Making our way down the stairs, we can pass through a door and enter the Driftshade cellar. Here we find piles and piles of storage barrels. In the southwestern corner of the room, we find an unlocked chest with some loot inside, and there's also a couple pieces of gold inside of a nearby end table. Heading north, we enter a maze of barrels. Gosh, if we're not careful, we'll get lost in here. Suddenly, a silver hand rushes out from around the corner.
That's all you've got!
Now that's what I call teamwork. After looting the silver hand, we notice that there's a prison cell to the south. Inside is a werewolf lying dead on the floor, a sight that is eerily similar to the ones we saw inside of Gallows Rock. The cell is locked, and although we could pick it if we wanted to, it doesn't look like there's anything interesting inside, so we'll just continue onward. Heading north, we find a couple of shelves with an abundance of armor and weapons, along with a potion of minor magicka and a potion of minor stamina. Down some stairs to the east is a small table with a steel helmet and an iron sword, and just up ahead is a wooden door leading into the vat room. After taking out a couple of Silverhand and looting their bodies, we can grab a couple of potions on a shelf and then read the book The Rear Guard, which increases our light armor level. There's some more barrels in the corner, and a giant hole in the wall to the north, leading into an icy tunnel. Boy, this place sure is in bad shape. The tunnel leads us into a giant ice cave. Here we can fend off some more Silverhand.
What was that?
What was that?
Inside of the ice cave, we find two cages, one of which has a dead horse inside, though I'm not exactly sure why the Silverhand were interested in capturing a horse in the first place. In any event, inside of the second cage is a werewolf. Perhaps this is why the tunnel was barred with a gate earlier. In case the werewolves got out, at least they could contain them inside of the basement. We could have picked the lock, but based on what happened when we tried to free a werewolf from captivity back at Gallows Rock, I decided to leave it be. The ice tunnel continues to the north and leads us back inside the fortress, where we get attacked by a Silverhand sporting a rather unique hairstyle. After looting the Silverhand, we look up and realize that we're standing in the center of a torture room. Two pieces of blood-stained restraint equipment sit in the corners of the room, and behind them, a stone wall splattered with even more blood. Unspeakable things happened in this chamber, and the Silverhand, driven by a blind hatred for those unlike them, are to blame. From the torture room, we can enter a tunnel to the north and follow it until we come to a large chamber. Here we find two more Silverhand, but Vilkas and I were able to make short work of them.
Ace! Mercy!
Victory is yours. I submit.
Looking around the room, we start to realize just how much damage this fortress has taken over the years. Nearly the entire chamber lies in ruin, with giant stone pillars crumbling under their own weight and rubble just about everywhere we look. Ferns are beginning to sprout up from the floor, a clear sign that this place was likely abandoned for a long time before the Silverhand moved in. Interestingly, the only part of this chamber that seems to be intact is the grand fireplace, behind which we find a shelf containing a coin purse, an elixir of the night, and an elixir of pickpocketing. There is also an apothecary's satchel on the top shelf with some ingredients inside. To the south is another tunnel for us to follow that leads out of the cellar and back to Driftshade Refuge. In this next room, we can loot a potion sitting beside a lit brazier, and then up some stairs to the south is another room with 3 more Silverhand.
Come on!
Ace!
Once the Silverhand are dead and their bodies have been looted, we notice that there are 2 elevated platforms, one to the east and another to the west. Heading up to the western platform first, we find an unlocked chest containing some gold hide boots and a staff of calm, which causes creatures and people up to level 8 not to fight for 30 seconds. That's all there was in terms of loot for this platform, so turning around, we can step up to the eastern platform and see if there's anything of interest. On top of a table surrounded by mounted werewolf heads are the fragments of wuuthrad. The ones that were previously in our possession but were stolen when the Silverhand launched their attack on Jorrvaskr. The rest of the companions will be happy to hear about this, no doubt. Just a few steps south, on top of a smaller end table, is a coin purse and a copy of the book Warrior, which increases our block level. From here, we can head south through a barred door, which brings us right back into one of the first rooms we found ourselves in after entering Driftshade Refuge. The exit to Skyrim is just up ahead. With all of the wuuthrad fragments recovered, we can head back to Whiterun with Vilkas.
The others have probably prepared Kodlak's funeral by now. Come up to the Sky Forge to pay your respects.
As we head up to the Sky Forge, we can briefly reflect upon the final few weeks of Kodlak's life. Here was a man who wanted nothing more than to defeat the beast within him and pass on to Sovngarde. Instead, he got dragged into a war that he wanted nothing to do with, and was denied entry to Sovngarde in the end. Kodlak was a good man who deserved better than this. The least we could do was attend the funeral and pay our respects.
Who will start?
I'll do it. Before the ancient flame.
We grieve.
We grieve.
At this loss,
We weep.
We weep. For the fallen,
We shout.
we shout.
And for ourselves, we
We
take
take
our
our
leave.
leave. His spirit is departed. Members of the Circle, let us withdraw to the Underforge to grieve our last together.
do you have the fragments of wuuthrad still? I'll need to prepare them for mounting again.
Yes, sir. I return them to you with honor.
Don't get too flowery on me, lad. Of course, I have a small favor to ask of you. There's another piece that Kodlak always kept close to himself. Would you go to his chambers and bring it back for me? I'm not sure I'm the best one to go through his things.
Of course, it would be my pleasure.
Thank you. I'll be here.
After making our way down into the Jorrvaskr living quarters and entering Kodlak's room at the end of the hall, we can search through his end table and take the final fragment of wuuthrad. But what's this? Kodlak's journal. We'll open it up and find out what he wrote in our next and final episode on the Companion's questline. I have to admit, even as I sit here narrating this, I'm completely torn on how I should feel about Kodlak's death and the war on the Silver Hand. At first, I felt as though I was doing the right thing by following Aella and working to stamp out the Silver Hand. I thought that Kodlak was being naive in thinking that if we just laid down our weapons, then the violence would come to an end. But now I fear that he might have been right. We initiated a cycle of retaliation, and it ended up costing him his life. Folks, I would love to know your thoughts on this one. Were we wrong to go to war with the Silver Hand? Do you think there could have been a more peaceful way to go about defeating them? And if so, how? And what about Kodlak? Are we responsible for his death, or aren't we? Let me know in the comments below. I post new videos on Skyrim every single Thursday and Friday, folks, so be sure to subscribe to my channel to stay up to date on all of my latest content. If you're an entertainment junkie like I am, then you might like my brand new podcast, Pass the Veal, where we discuss everything from upcoming video games to movies and television shows. I post video versions of the podcast right here on my YouTube channel every Sunday night at 7:00 p.m. Eastern Time, so be sure to check that out as well. But that's all for now, folks. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time for our final episode on the Companion's questline.
Finish this! That's all you got?